Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back to another segment of the Late Night Show with Dr. Kojo. I'm your host, Kojo, checking in from sunny Los Angeles, California. It got dark a little bit earlier today because of the daylight savings. And yesterday was super long, but today's been a good day so far. And I'm excited because we have a guest. We have a special guest here today, and it's been a couple of months since we've had a guest. So I'm excited for that reason, number one. And then the second reason is our guest is also a part of the Neurodivergent community. So I need y'all to welcome her with open arms. And then the third reason is we've talked a lot about polyamory here on this channel, and it's something that I don't have all the answers to. So I definitely want to explore more and talk about it a lot more, and she can give us some insight into that. So I'm super excited. So my dog is tripping. All right, so let's go ahead and introduce yourself. Let me know what your name is and where you're checking in from, and we're gonna bring our special guest Lexi in very shortly. So this is my blurb. You know about me. We got Mono in here. Mono, I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Rome, what's up? What's up? How you doing? Ivana in the house. How are you doing? Caleb, I'm happy you could catch this. I think you'll learn a lot today. Austin, how are you doing? What's up? Kayla. Yeah, Austin's an OG. I appreciate you. Palmdale, California. Okay. Oh, is Dr. Hanson? Who's Dr. Hanson? Me? Am I polyamorous? I don't know. My ex-girlfriends would probably just say I'm a cheater. So we can explore that, because the whole concept of polyamory, I love the concept of it. Not that everybody should have to do it, but just the concept of compersion and a couple of other terms that we'll get into. But the concept of it is fascinating, regardless of where you stand on it. Tacoma, Washington in the house. What's up, Stephanie? Shannon, what's up? What's up? Yuki from Brazil, how are you doing? Faith, I appreciate you. You've been part of the family for a while. Emily, how are you doing? Charlotte in the house from Croatia. Okay. We got Kimmy from Washington State. Augusta, Georgia in the house. The home team, Augusta, Georgia. Shannon is new. I hope you enjoy it. Maine in the house. Canada in the house. Okay, awesome. All right, so I'm going to bring in our special guest today. I'll let her introduce herself. I'm so excited to get into it. So let's go ahead. Without any further ado, this is Lexi on Instagram. The name is at Slutty for Serotonin. Is that correct?
Yeah. Hey, guys. It's so nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Anytime.
Yeah, I'm Lexi. I'm from Denver. Well, I live in Denver, Colorado. I'm from New York City. And I'm a somatic coach, and I work with the neurodivergent community, people looking to explore kink and polyamory, and a myriad of other things too. Yeah.
Awesome. Let me switch you. I want people to be able to see perfectly. So before we even get into, because we're talking about relationships today and non-traditional relationships, and there's a lot of shame when it comes to a non-traditional relationship, depending on your background. I come from I'm still a Christian, come from a very religious background. So I couldn't even watch Pokemon growing up because the creatures were evolving, right? So, we're talking about non-traditional relationships. This is way out from what we're used to. But before we get into the polyamory and non-traditional relationships, can you just talk about your journey with being diagnosed with ADHD and autism, especially somebody who was diagnosed later in life, because that's very fascinating.
Yeah. So the first time I took medication for ADHD, I was like in college probably. And all of my friends who took it got like really hyped and were like really amped up the whole night. And I had like never been so calm in my life.
Yeah.
Like I got so much accomplished. I went to bed at like a normal hour. They were like, it didn't keep you up all night. And I was like, no, like, is it supposed to? And I didn't really think much of it. I went to work and did all the things I thought I was supposed to do. But all along, like I always felt like so much of my like brain power wasn't online almost. Like I couldn't like do all of these things because I was so preoccupied with like how difficult existing in the world felt.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know like what any of that meant. I was just like going through my life. But as I got to my like end of my 30s, I was in kind of a not great relationship. And I just kept telling my somatic coach at the time, like how tired I was. I was like, And everyone keeps asking why, and I don't know. Like, I had a really good job. I was nourishing myself. I went to acupuncture twice a month. I got a massage once a month. Like, I was like taking such good care of myself. And it was like just to like achieve homeostasis. Like, it was like just to function. Like, that's what was required to take care of me and like nourish me.
Just getting by.
Yeah, truly. And at one point she was like, listen, I like can't diagnose you with anything, but your couples therapist who I was with my not great partner had mentioned like, oh, like she can't help it, like she just has ADHD. And I was like, I didn't say that. Like, who says who? And I like went about it, but then I talked to my somatic coach and she was like, why don't you just go and do the like do the intake and see what the doctor says, and like if you existing in the world feels like you're carrying 50 pounds every day and some form of medication can make you feel like you're only carrying 20 pounds, like isn't that worth exploring this? And I was like, I don't know. And she was like, is this like an aversion to medication because you like have this idea that you have to be able to do it on your own? And I was like, maybe, you know what, like I'll just go and I'll see, because like they could just say I don't have ADHD.
Right.
That is not what they said. It was like a crazy, it was like the score was like out of 100 and it was like the 90, like a high 90 percentile.
Like,
and I was like,
everything you were like aligning with, right?
Yeah. My like former gifted kid was like, so you're telling me I got an A+ in ADHD? And they gave me, a prescription and I started taking it. And I like, honestly, I think I cried the first day. Like, I was like, oh, like
I see that a lot. Yeah.
I can actually just do these things that felt so difficult for so long. Like, for me, the biggest thing is I really struggle with like taking everything. I have a lot of really big ideas, and taking those ideas and like synthesizing them into something that is like actionable is so difficult for me when I'm unmedicated. Right. But the second I take the medication, I'm like, oh, this goes here, and I can just like process so like seamlessly. So at first it was amazing. I was really thrilled. And then I started to notice that taking the ADHD medication actually made my like what I now know are like the symptoms of the way that my autism impacts me, like much more prevalent in my life. Like I was like all of a sudden like the most noise sensitive I'd ever been. Like there was all these things that I think that I was just like too distracted to like harp on, and I would kind of just like ignore them, like almost like I dissociated through. Today it was crazy. I was at a hot spring and I like felt it was like a really not good texture of the like rubber on the floor, and I was like, I hate this so much. And I like had this flashback to like swim team when I was like 8 years old and how much I hated the floor. And I was like, there were so many things actually in my life that felt so so terrible to me that I just ignored. And so after I started like noticing more of the symptoms, I started getting like a lot of content on like TikTok. And then so my background actually is international affairs, but my focus of study was contemporary culture and society. So I did like a lot of like anthropology, sociology. So like research is like my favorite. And so I just like went into a black hole of like months of just like researching autism and like studies that people had done, and how like so many of them are just on like young boys, and like they didn't actually, and they're like all white boys too. So like they didn't study literally anybody else. And so it skewed the entire like diagnostic criteria. And then also like so much of the diagnosis is about the way we impact the world. Whereas like so much of my experience as an ADHD individual is internal. Like it's all what I'm experiencing, but I never made that anybody else's problem. And so they just didn't notice it. And so the journey since finding that piece out has been really wild. And I've like, the journey of unmasking has been really beautiful and messy and overwhelming. And there's, a lot of grief that comes along with all the things that I didn't know, like that I was just unaware of, all the help I didn't get, all of the support I didn't have, all of the ways I ignored my needs for so long. There's like a lot of grief around that, but there's also like this really fun, exciting energy of like, wow, now I actually get to do all of these things that I actually really loved as a kid, but only could give it like 30% of my brain power because 70% was just going to masking and all the other things that I was doing. So like I've started playing the piano again. I've started like coloring and like reading like fantasy books that I like loved as a kid, and just like really diving into all of these like things that make me so excited. And there's so much information. Like I see the comment right now, like there's so much information out there. Which is why for me, like the biggest thing about like the content I make and like the work that I try and do is to help individuals like learn to support their needs, because I think that so much of what we've experienced in our life has been people negating our needs, telling us that we were wrong for having them, our feelings were too big, our meltdowns were too big, we were overreacting, like all of this stuff that feels so disempowering, honestly, right? Like there's so much of like, you can't trust your experience, and that's actually not true. Like often we are spot on, we know what's going on, like we are super aware of the situation. And so like rebuilding that trust with my clients is like the biggest thing for me, is like, how do you learn to trust yourself, and how do we actually figure out what your needs are so you can support yourself in the way that nobody really supported you growing up.
Right. You're trying to be the person that you needed when you were 17, 27, right?
Truly. One of the Facebook groups that I joined, like the first thing I did is actually like a really beautiful parenting group for PDA kids. Mm-hmm. And I've like learned so much from the way that they parent their children and how I reparent myself now. Like, I'm like, oh, like I give myself choices. Like that feels better than telling myself I have to do something. Like giving myself just like the options actually feels so much more supportive to me. And it sounds silly, like sometimes when I explain the things I have to do for my autism and ADHD, but like, who cares? If it works for you, like that's the most important thing. If it supports you, like who cares what it looks like?
What are a couple of things that you have to do for your autism and ADHD just to function? And this is a safe space, by the way. Like out here we have weird kinks. We like the smell of gas. We don't like the way the socks fit on our feet.
Nobody.
Safe space right here.
That's my favorite question, is like, are you the kind of neurodivergent who has to wear socks everywhere because the floor is dirty, or can you not wear socks anywhere because the way the line feels on your toes makes you want to die? I'm like, I am the socks make me want to die. And I was playing Pokemon Go with my partner today, and he was like, is your character barefoot? And I was like, I don't even want shoes in a fake life. Okay. This is a barefoot zone. So like, for instance, like at the end of the day, like brushing my teeth and washing my face was like always just like, I hated it. Like, I don't want to do it. Like, it was just like so frustrating. Oh my God. Yes. Socks. So thank you. They're the worst. So like, yeah, like I hated it. And also growing up, my mom like definitely wanted to be supportive of me. But a lot of what that looked like was her like telling me like, you have to brush your hair, you have to wash your hair, you have to brush your teeth, you have to do it. Like, it was a lot of like telling me what to do. And I've learned that I have a PDA profile. I've learned that there are people with far more assertive PDA profiles than mine. But
can you explain PDA for those who don't?
Yeah, for sure. So the original term, I think, is pathological demand avoidance. From my perspective, pathological demand avoidance feels a lot like the autism diagnosis of like, how do you like you people affect us, which is the vibe that like, because it's like, it's how it feels to the receiver. But to us, I prefer the other phrase, which is pervasive drive for autonomy, which is much more like how it feels internally. So for me, and like for my partner as well, like our autonomy is like the most important thing. So we can't feel like our autonomy is being challenged, and like the ways that manifests are like weird. Like, you know, it's sometimes we don't know what's going to happen. Sometimes we accidentally like, you know, make the other person get really activated because that's what it looks like. And so for me, I found that like I had this real aversion to this, like brushing my teeth, washing my face, like lotioning my face. Like there's so many like tasks to initiate, and it's like the end of the day, I'm like always so drained and like out of energy. And so one of the moms in the group was like, you have to give choices to PDA kids. So like my kid does, I don't say like, okay, it's time to brush your teeth. She'll say like, do you want to brush your teeth first or put your pajamas on first? Which is obviously like a very child-friendly way of doing that. But to me, I had this realization of like, oh, how much of my life am I actually like not like I'm choosing by default because I refuse to do the thing that's being told that I'm being told I have to do. So then I'm just defaulting to not doing that. But like if I actually do want to do it, maybe I can like regulate myself and like put the PDA kind of like in its place in my brain and then choose differently.
Yeah.
And so for me now I'm like, okay, do you want to like go to bed as is, or do you want to like brush your teeth, wash your face, like use all of the like nice soaps and lotions that you love and like it smells good and it feels good on your skin? It's so dry in Colorado, like, and I'm just like the driest person. I literally put like oil on me like 4 times a day. So like I'm like, oh, it actually like feels nice and I'm actually choosing to like give myself something.
Right.
And so for me, like those little things have been really big. Or when I notice the activation from my part, like if he says something to me that triggers me, I will like then communicate that to him, right? Like, hey, the way that you said like whatever, the other day he wanted cookies and like it was getting late and he was getting tired and he was like, so are you going to make those cookies? And I was like, now I'm not.
Right. No cookies for you.
And then in that moment I was like, okay, like it actually just didn't feel good that that's like the way you worded it. If the issue is that you are getting tired, I'd rather you give me the context so I can choose what to do with that context, right? Like you're getting tired, you're not going to want to eat them much longer. Okay, I can finish the one task I'm doing. I don't have to hyper focus for the next 4 hours on this activity. I can put the laptop down, go make the cookies, come back, and like then we can like reassess from there. So like just finding ways to work with the pervasive drive for autonomy. So knowing what feels good, knowing what triggers my like fight or flight response around my autonomy, and kind of navigating that, and also like the same on my partner's end. So understanding what activates his and how we meet each other better in that, how we change the way we communicate to accommodate for the things that might not feel great to us.
Thank you so much for explaining that. And and I even like your new definition, pervasive drive for autonomy. And speaking of that, I believe that there's a link here. And I still gotta get the science to back it up, but there's a link here between this and also just the origin behind the thought process of polyamory and non-traditional relationships. And you were talking about being diagnosed later in life and being tired. I see that all the time from friends, from patients. I'm tired. And then when you're telling your parents, like, get some sleep, it's not physical tired. Like I'm emotionally worn out. Like I'm just spent. Like I'm tired. I've been tired for years. So when you finally get to this position where you're now in charge, relinquishing any type of control, it just feels kind of like abusive, or feels like it's somebody's crossing a barrier because you haven't been able to trust what you feel. You haven't felt like you're in control. So now you have some sort of autonomy and you're unmasking, you're learning to love yourself. And then somebody comes into your life and they're like, all right, you're my person. You got to stay here. You got to do this. And it feels like, and maybe you would want to be monogamous or whatever you might want to do. But just them telling 100%. You to like, oh, you're mine now. And that's one thing that I've always struggled with, where it's like, oh no, you're mine. And it feels like you have to be you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. So I think definitely there's an overlap between having a drive for autonomy and wanting to be able to explore beyond a monogamous relationship. That being said, I think no matter what the container of relating that like you and your partner or partners choose, the thing about polyamory that feels so beautiful is the element of choice and intention. So instead of what usually happens in a lot of monogamous relationships is there's this like relationship escalator where people are like, oh, we like date, we get exclusive, we do you know, whatever, we go on a weekend trip together, we go on a month, like a week-long trip together, we move in together, we get married, we have kids. Like there's these very like distinct steps, and within those distinct steps there's also a lot of like rules that people just think everybody agrees to, because that's how neurotypicals function, right? They're just like, oh, we have rules and everybody abides by them, but people don't actually like make agreements around like what you're choosing to do, right? So like for me, that's why like some people, you know, can say like, oh, well, like you do, like you practice like non-monogamy or you practice poly or like whatever. And like, I honestly just like don't really care about the name. Like there's so many labels. This also could just be my like ADHD, but I'm like, I don't care. Like for me, it's so much more important that the people choosing to be in the container of this relationship are aware of what they're agreeing to, right? So like how often do you hear, 100%. Oh, like I liked a girl's photo on Instagram, my girlfriend got mad and I don't understand why? Because you never talked about it. So you have no idea what her boundaries are, what her limits are, what like her concerns are, what her insecurities are, how you hold her and support her through that. Like, because they just don't talk about it.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, we won't mention it. Or like, and like, what does constitute cheating? Yeah. Because like for me, cheating is a like violation of our agreements, right? Like we both agreed to these things. And if you then choose to go do something outside of what we've agreed to, that's a breach of trust to me, right? Because we've discussed all this stuff, we navigated it. Does that mean it's like a perfect plan? Like, no, sometimes you haven't discussed things and it comes up and you have to talk about it in the moment or talk about it later on. Like, this is a great example. We had a date with this woman. It was probably our second date.
It was you and your partner, or just
me? Yeah, it was me, my partner, and this woman. And we had gone on a date once before, and we were at a second date, and then we came back to our house after the date, and then both of my dogs got sick, and like I was just like so overstimulated by like everything. Like I didn't want anyone to touch. Like I was just like couldn't handle it. And we had never talked about like what happens in that moment. Like, what do you do if like somebody is like overwhelmed? And so like, I'm just like, I will always default to like blatant honesty. And so I was just like, hi, I'm overstimulated. The thought of anybody touching me right now makes me want to die. Can we just like sit, have like a glass of wine, chit chat for a little bit? Let me see how like my body's feeling. We can check back in like half an hour and then we can decide if we like want to play or do anything from there. But the comfortability that I like had to build up in the relationship to feel safe enough to do that in that moment was like huge.
Right.
And so for me, I think as long as the people who are choosing to be a part of whatever the container is agree to it, I kind of don't care what anybody else thinks. Like there's a lot of people who love to gatekeep and like feel like there's a right way to do things and a wrong way to do things. And like, I just think that like we're all different people, and like to say that there's only one way to relate when there's billions of people in the world choosing to relate with people feels so wild. Like as long as everybody is like 100% transparent, 100% in agreement, like everything is like a fuck yes. Like if anything's even like I'm not sure, like it's a no. Like I'd rather have a small sandbox to play in that everybody feels super safe in than like having a much wider one that like doesn't feel good and like might bring up things. Like you build the safety slowly.
And one thing I like is the intentionality. And go back to the earlier point, you said that there's this element of having choices and choosing. And I also want to just mention that even in monogamous relationships, there's still that element to where you wake up and you choose your person. It's just that
100%.
in terms of cheating is not as clearly defined. And from what I've seen in monogamous relationships, we like to shy away from defining what cheating is. You kind of just wait until something happens, and it's like, oh, you shouldn't like this person's photo on Instagram, or
or I didn't know that texting my ex-girlfriend at 2:00 in the morning like is the bad, you know what I mean? Like I didn't know that was going to bother you. Like it's just so like it all lives so much in the shadow realm that like it's so not discussed. And especially for neurodivergent people, like it's so important. Like and it made me so nervous because so my previous relationship, my ex-partner was a cuck, so he like liked watching me sleep with other people or hearing about it or whatever. And so that was a very different experience because basically everything was my like.
It was on you, or
it was like left to me and like my comfortability, because it was like I would choose to date people. Like it was very much about me, but we didn't really date that. We dated like a few couples, but not like a ton. And we didn't date any like single women. And I'm very bisexual. And so this relationship is like where I've gotten to like date women, and it's been amazing that I've gotten to do that with my partner, and I love that. And there's like a part of me that was like really nervous about like, oh, like how do you communicate? Like how do you do this? Like am I going to make people uncomfortable? Like I don't know. And like the overwhelming positive response that I've gotten from just like clear communication up front has been like across the board. I will preface this by saying nearly everybody that we match with, that we actually vibe with, that we want to go on a date with, ends up being neurodivergent.
Say that one more time, because I hope UCLA or USC or some university lets me do a study about this, because I just don't have the facts to back it up. And like in psychiatry, we go off of evidence-based information, but there's some link there that you're probably further ahead of me.
I would love to study it too. There are like probably a lot of people that aren't neurodivergent, but I think that like in general, I mean, I feel like we've all seen the meme that's like ADHD people travel in packs like poorly regulated wolves. Like if all your friends have ADHD, I have news for you, or whatever it is. Like, like I think that that's also part of it. Like I think we just like attract and are attracted to other neurodivergent people because they tend to be much more clear about their communication. They tend to be like much more open in that way. They tend to like, kind of have like different like just getting to like explore those different like facets of it. But there is something to be said about just like how appreciative people are about the like honest communication. Like I'll say like, hey, FYI, like we're really excited about our first date, and we just like to set the groundwork that like we don't play on first dates. We think it's super important for everybody to like be able to enjoy the date without having to worry like, how's it going to end? Are we going to go back to somebody's house? Like blah, blah, blah. Like just enjoy it, get to like go home, take some time, process, make sure it all feels good. And then if it all feels good, we can set up a second date and do something fun. And like, then we can start to talk about playing. But like, I like to have like the first, that was something that came up for me in my past relationship, was that I sometimes would feel rushed to make a decision. And like often we're meeting for drinks, and like, it just didn't feel like clear to me. And so it feels so much better.
Relationships or no? Were those monogamous relationships where you felt rushed, or?
No, I mean, he, like I said, he liked watching me with other people. So sometimes we would go on a date with a person and it felt like he wanted it to happen and the other guy wanted it to happen. And like, I had like a beer and it just like didn't feel very like clear. And so I prefer the like, let's go on a date. Let's make sure everyone feels safe and good and has a good time and like doesn't have to worry about, those like, what if moments at the end of the night, and you can just like take the time to actually process what feels good.
No, I like that. And also, we don't talk enough about consent and making sure that people feel comfortable. regardless of whatever relationship it is, monogamous, any type of relationship, the topic of consent is kind of uncomfortable when, in all actuality, if it's brought up in the beginning, you can clearly communicate with somebody. That way, you know that you're not overstepping their boundaries, and likewise, you can feel safe as well. So I think just the nature of the polyamorous, open relationship, non-traditional relationship, it lends itself to you having to state that up front, because or else things are not going to be to the point where people feel like they can comfortably consent for themselves, which we know is very important.
So important. And I think something that's really important is like, it's beyond just getting consent for things, right? Like, I need for you and like any partner we have to feel safe saying no. And like, if I don't trust your
All
no,
right.
I also won't play with you. So like my
Okay.
current partner and I, we enjoy cucking men. So we enjoy having men be submissive to us. And also they like spoiling us and like taking us out to dinners. Like it's super fun.
Oh wow,
And
I've never heard of that before. Wow.
oh yeah, like they like to like act like they're my boyfriend and that like we're on a date and then like I'm like leaving with my partner, but my partner and I have great chemistry. We like both enjoy the scene. Like they just like cucks just.
So it's backwards. Is you
Mhm.
meet somebody and then that person acts as if they're your boyfriend, but then you leave with your primary partner.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, that
Yeah,
makes sense.
they like the scene because like a lot of cucks like a will like get into a normal monogamous relationship and then like want to push this on their partner, which doesn't always go well.
Right.
Um, or a lot of them are just single and like don't have a girlfriend, but like they still enjoy the kink. And my partner and I both enjoy it from this side. So, you know, it's a great dynamic when it works. And also, like, we had a cuck that we really enjoyed playing with. We played with him a few times. Like, we had a lot of fun, but he was really just like not good at communicating his desires, his needs. We would ask so many questions. We would like ask clarifying questions, and we just like never felt clear on what he was and wasn't okay with. And so, like, immediately we were both like, we can't do this anymore. Like, we like everybody, the consent needs to feel safe, like across the board. Like,
Right.
we also need to feel safe that we know what you've consented to, and you should feel safe that your consent will be honored and like that you can say no and safe word and whatever, and everything will immediately stop.
Right. That it and it's crazy because I never thought that you would. I don't know why I didn't think that, but I never thought that you would have those conversations like upfront to this depth. Like I knew that you have a conversation, but the depth at which you go into it, it's good to see that on both sides. And we know that consent's a tricky thing, right? So you can tell somebody, "Hey, are you comfortable?" And they say, "I'm comfortable," but you can judge by their cadence, you can judge by their body language, you can judge by how they operate, and you might say, "I don't know if this person is actually comfortable, or maybe they feel intimidated to speak up for themselves." So as a result of that, I'm just going to back up because I don't feel comfortable.
That's a big one. Like, if I don't trust that you will say no and you will stop things, I don't feel safe to play in that container, especially when my partner and I are in like a dominant role and we're playing with a submissive partner. Like, I need to trust that you will, because a big part of like a big part of consent is making the other person feel safe in their no. But there's also people who just are people pleasers who don't feel comfortable communicating things, and like that also doesn't feel safe on the dom side, right? Like, a lot of BDSM and kink can be playing in the edges space where things can be edgy and where you might need a safe word, where you might need to like stop a scene. And if I don't trust my submissive partner to hold that, because that's
Right.
theirs to hold, right? Like, I can't know where
They're right.
their actual limits lie. Like, I'll know about the limits we've agreed to, but if something changes in the moment, I need to feel safe that they'll let us know that their mind has changed. And so, like, that's the thing about consent. Like, yeah, consent in kink can be really specific and very extensive because there are so many that require physical safety. that, and a lot of us, like, there's a lot of people who also use it as like a healing modality for things that, I mean, BDSM doesn't have to be a part of polyamory. It is a part, it's a very big part of our relationship. And I think it falls more in alignment with the just like building unique relationships that work for you. It might involve kink, it might involve BDSM, it might involve polyamory, but it might be a very vanilla monogamous relationship that will still benefit from you guys talking openly and honestly about your limits, desires, boundaries, and needs. And so, yeah, there is something about the world of like BDSM where when you're engaging in these things that might involve physical safety or emotional safety, a lot of times, like if you're giving up like a huge amount of power, like that can be like a very like emotionally sensitive thing. Also, for a lot of us who are neurodivergent, like the way stimuli impacts us from day to day could be so different. Like there are some days that my body is so sensitive. The thought of like my partner using like any of our like flogging tools on me like would be so overwhelming. And then there's days where like I feel so much less in my body and it like helps me drop back into my body, but like I'm capable of like taking so much more. So like yes, consent is important. And also there has to be room for communication within that because so many things are in flux during a scene, during like any type of like BDSM interaction.
Right. And for those of y'all who are watching along, once somebody dropped the magic word in around the 30-minute mark, I forgot to, it's 36 minutes. Around the 30-minute mark, somebody drops in the magic word and then we take a water break. Because as neurodivergent people, we forget to drink water. That's why I have these half and open water bottles around the house.
I have no in between. I either like waterboard myself all day and drink like 100 ounces of water or something insane, or I like forget to drink for 12 hours. Like I don't have like just like a normal cadence of drinking water.
It's frustrating because it's a way of life. And we have to be like, oh, I gotta drink water. I gotta eat. I gotta do.
Yeah. Oh, I have to take care of myself. Darn.
Right. The magic word is cheers. All right. So wherever y'all are sipping on at home, it could be something else. You know, I like to roll water, but the magic word is cheers. Everybody get some water in, and then we'll continue this conversation. Big cheers, y'all.
I can definitely speak more to the healing powers of kink and BDSM.
Yeah, I'm interested in that. I've never heard it described as a healing power. Do you think that that's like a form of taking your power? Well, actually, I'll let you explain.
So I don't think I mean, I might have said healing power. I don't know. I think I said healing modality. But for me, it's just like, so the biggest thing about somatic work is that the modality doesn't really matter. So it's not like a lot of other therapies, because a lot of therapy is like, oh, we're going to talk about it. Or like, oh, we're going to do like whatever, like CBT, like we're going to do this like very specific thing. That's like not what somatic work is at all. Somatic work is the approach to the therapeutic process. So the thing about somatics is that like it is all basically it's all about our body and our nervous system, which is why I think it's such a powerful healing modality for neurodivergent people, because often what we're experiencing in our body is very overwhelming.
Right.
And so learning how to regulate that feels really good. And so a big part of somatic work is just moving slowly enough to actually like process what's happening and like titrate our bodies slow enough that we're like capable of holding it. So that means like moving through big feelings. That means talking about it. That means like letting yourself cry, letting yourself be sad. It means like learning how to experience all of the things and letting yourself move slowly enough that, and that's, I know it's like so hard. I also like,
we'll talk about the shame in just a second, Shannon. I have something to say about that.
Like there's so much around how we interact with the world. And so like learning how to slow down and process through things, especially for those of us who have ADHD, and that already moves really fast. And then I also found a woman yesterday who also like had a Venn diagram. I posted it on Threads. It was like ADHD, autism, and giftedness. And like one of the things in giftedness is like skip thinking, which I didn't realize was a thing. But like I'll go from like A to Q, and like everybody else in the vicinity will be like, how did you get here from what we were talking about? And to me, like it makes such clear sense that like it would jump there. But because of that, the practice of just slowing down and like letting whatever needs to process through take up the space that it needs to feels so important.
Yeah, and for the people who are watching, I think she was glitching, but we're back. Her name is Lexi, and the @name is at Slutty for Serotonin. Before the live stream ends, I'll put that name on there, so don't worry about that. But yeah, I think you were glitching, but I think we're back to being okay now.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you good.
Okay, awesome.
And I have a question. It kind of goes with Kay's question, but so do all parties, to be honest with it, do require all. I have my emotions socially appropriate Midwest. So does this make sense to you, Lexi, or do you see where she's coming from?
So I don't think there's one right or wrong way to do relationships. So if you don't care that this person's married and like that's fine to you and like they're fine with it, then like again, like you guys are choosing to do that, like that's fine. For me personally, that's not worth it. Like the mess that implodes isn't worth it to me. And it also just like doesn't feel aligned, because like if this person is willing to lie to one of their partners, why would I trust that they're not going to lie to me about anything, like about consent, about sexual health, about like any of like the really important things, right? Like if they're so willing to lie, like I just don't trust you in my space, quite frankly. For me, it's like less about the fact that you want to sleep with other people and more about the fact that you're totally comfortable being dishonest. So for me, it's like a no. But again, like if you're good with it, and like maybe in this situation, like you said, it's your like emotional support partner or whatever, like I don't know if that like means maybe you're not like seeing them in person. So if it's just like somebody you're texting and like it doesn't really affect you, like maybe maybe that's okay for you. My parents, I grew up very Christian.
Someone was talking to me here. But Bible says, "But man and woman become one." Why are you endorsing her conversation on her twisted outside of God's design for marriage? All right, so real quick, Bobby, and Bobby, this is no shame to you. It's not for me. You may have missed the beginning part of the stream. It's not about whether you choose to have a monogamous relationship or a polyamorous. It's not about that. It's about allowing the space for somebody to have options. If they want to go this way, they can go this way. The Bible gives people free choice. You can go this way, you can go that way. And I don't think it's right to take somebody and lock them into a certain thing. And like we all know as kids, right? Sometimes a lot of us who are neurodivergent, we're smart. Like we'll question parents, like, why is this, that? Why? And a lot of times when there's no answers, parents will say, oh, no, this is just how we do things. I think it's important to explain things. And it's not, hey, Leilani, how are you doing? That's one of our moderators from Tennessee. And it's not about this is the right way to do things or that's the right way to do things. It's more so about having the space for people to choose what they want to do. And you said you grew up really Christian, Lexi. In the beginning, when you decided this was the lifestyle for you, my question is, can you talk about the shame that came along with, maybe your parents or like you being afraid of what people would think about you, people from your hometown or so on and so forth?
So I knew I was bisexual when I was like 22. And I didn't tell anyone. And then I was with my family, and granted, we had like a glass of wine and like maybe it wasn't the appropriate time to bring it up, but somebody like made an offhanded comment about bisexuals and it didn't land well with me. And so I just like let them know that it didn't land well, that I was bisexual and like I didn't
Wow.
like bisexuals being talked about in that way. And it was like immediately shut down. And I had so much shame around it in that moment. Like I was like, I shouldn't have said that. Like they're judging me. And then they never brought it up again. So for like 5 years, nobody ever mentioned that I had told everybody that I also like women. And
these are your parents, right?
my parents and my siblings, or one sibling. Yeah, one of my siblings. And then, like I mentioned, I was in this relationship. He and I ended things, and I like finally explained to my family like what had been going on behind closed doors. There was a lot more to the relationship that they didn't know, that like all this stuff was happening. And so that's when I like explained, like, you know, like I'm now dating my current partner who was like a bull for my ex and I. So like my current partner and I dated for like the last 6 months of my other relationship. And then when he and I ended things, my current partner and I chose to continue dating. And so I, you know, had to explain all of this to my family because there was like a lot going on. Because all of a sudden they were like, well, why are you like, if you're just breaking up with your partner, like, why are you also dating this other person, like kind of seriously? And I was like, well, we've been dating for 7 months. Like, I'm not going to stop dating. I'm not going to stop dating him just because like this happened. And so, and I think like I probably ended up doing it in like the most autistic way possible. But like when they just started like asking me questions and I just started like getting like pettier and pettier in my responses until like it was like just like hard because they were like being so like pushy around it. And like at one point, and it was actually so funny because I wasn't diagnosed as neurodivergent at the time. And my mom said to me like, oh, you just love being different. And I was like, I don't fucking like, I don't love being different. Like, what do you mean? Like, I just am different than a lot of people. Like a lot of people that we've engaged with, like, I'm just not like that. And like, that's okay. And I think, and then she like said something else about it. And I just looked at her and I was like, Mom, I don't go down on women because I like being different. Like I am attracted to women. Like, and that like ended the conversation. And in that moment, I just felt like these like shackles of like shame, like rip off. Like I was just like, I'm so tired. Like, and whatever, if the only way I'm going to get through to you is to like horrify you into like finally understanding, like, then that's what I'm going to do. But like, I need to not feel shame about like who I am and what I like. And like the fact that my partner and I enjoy dating people together, that we enjoy dating women or couples or having cucks like serve us. Like I don't give them all of the details because like they don't want it and that's totally fine. But you at the very least need to respect my choices in and around my relationship. Like that is the boundary that I set, is that like you don't have to want to hear everything. You don't have to want to be like participate in it. All of that is totally fine. But you do need to give me like the basic amount of like human decency and respect. And like I just
completely agree.
Couldn't care less like after that point. Like it was just like I'm not gonna let like the way society has deemed we have to live our lives, like because of religion, because of shame, because of all of these things. I'm not going to let that make me feel like I should be less than because of who I like, because of who I'm attracted to, because of the style of relating that I'm drawn to.
Yeah. Props to you for sticking up for yourself. It's really difficult to talk to your parents like this. And I try and explain this to parents all the time, especially when they're dealing with a child who's on the spectrum, a child who might be queer. I tell parents all the time that there's a strong link between, like, just take autism. There's a strong link between autism and gender dysphoria. These are real issues that kids are going through. Like you're grown, you're in your 30s, so you're able to speak up for yourself. But there's actually kids
even now, like as soon as I like realized that like non-binary was an option, like I was like, I feel so like most of the time my pronouns I put she, they, because I'm like, I feel like a she because I'm perceived as such. But like I don't feel a gender, like I just feel like myself. And like I enjoy, like I enjoy getting to explore like all of that. I enjoy getting to explore like the version of me that likes more masculine things, and I like getting to explore the version of me that likes more feminine things. And I don't like letting, you know, myself be squeezed into a box.
And in terms of your confidence right now today, do you feel like you're more confident in who you are because you've taken these bold choices for yourself? And I guess a two-part question for Kay's question right here. Do you feel like your need for the polyamorous lifestyle comes from not finding one person to check all the boxes as well?
That's not really my experience. I don't really think but I don't really have like boxes that like would be checked. Like I just like engage in like whatever the relationship is, and like so for me that's like not my personal experience, but I know that's a lot of people's personal experiences. Right. Like for me it's more like I love my partner, and like if we ended up just being us, like I wouldn't feel like, oh, that's like a bummer because like XYZ is like missing. Like I don't feel like there's anything missing. I just feel like I like women and he likes women, and we enjoy spending time with other kinky couples, and we enjoy spending time with cucks and like submissive men. And so like if we enjoy those things together, like they're just things that we get to enjoy together, and we get to meet cool people. And some of them have started off as like, you know, us dating and like turned into friendships. Some of them we like never even really dated. We just like, there's like a couple that we've just like been friendly with on like Instagram. Honestly, we like met on a dating app, and like we've all just been busy for like months and months, but like we've all like ended up really liking each other and like hanging out. I have a friend who like was interested in being poly. We all went out to just like see if there was chemistry. There wasn't, but like we ended up being great friends. And so like we all have like a ton of fun together, and we like going out together. Like I think there's a part of it that's also just like fun for like neurodivergent people to like meet other people. Like we get to enjoy each other's company, and like sometimes it ends up being a sexual relationship, and sometimes it doesn't. And like either way, you know, we've gotten to meet really awesome people and do really fun stuff together. We went on a few dates with a woman who like also really loves like reading like voraciously and like international affairs, and like I love that we get to like chat about that now. Like she's just a friend that I now get to have, and like I wouldn't have met her without this. And so for me it's not necessarily that like there's something missing, but it's just like what fun things and like containers and styles of relating could we like potentially add that like would feel good to everybody involved.
And when it comes to jealousy on both sides, how do you account for that? Or is there a safe word that you have, or is there some type of thing that you've spoken about beforehand where you say if it gets to this point, I no longer feel accepted, I no longer feel respect? Is there a process to that, or you just kind of play that by ear?
I think there's obviously like a lot of conversations. There's things there's things that we both are and aren't comfortable with. So like my partner and I are in a DS dynamic. He is my dom. I wear a collar that signifies that like he like owns me in this like dynamic and in this way. And so like I wouldn't have another dom and he wouldn't have another sub, because that's just like not what feels good to us. But like he and I have been dominant to other people together, and like that's been really fun and playful. And so we kind of discuss things that we're comfortable with. But like jealousy as it comes up is really something that we just have to like communicate about and ask for support around. Usually in my experience, like jealousy is often, as an emotion, like really important information. It's usually like, oh, somebody is getting something that I want, and right. I want that thing. And so if I'm feeling that way, then how do I get whatever the thing is that I need? And so if so like for me personally, like there are people who are poly who have like lots of long-term partners who like travel to them and do things like that. Like that doesn't feel good to me, because like I love spending time with my people, and I would always rather spend time with like my people together versus like splitting the time. Like that's just not my like personal preference. And
Oh,
so like I know that that's something that wouldn't feel good to me. And so like we just have like agreements around that stuff. And like he is my primary partner. Some people practice relationship anarchy, and like that's awesome. That means that like there's no hierarchy of like who and like what relationship would like take priority. So they wouldn't use terms like primary partner. In my humble opinion, I don't think there's any world in which you can really be non-hierarchical. Like if two of you are married and one of you is dating someone else, like you can say you're non-hierarchical all you want, but like in some ways there is a hierarchy, right? Like one person is your...
I would assume that, but because I wasn't familiar with the lifestyle, I wanted to make sure that I was using the right terms. But you always, well, I can't speak for everybody else, but in my head, you would think that there's like a primary person who's like, this is my person, and then some.
It totally depends on the person, right? There's some people who are solo poly, which means that they just like their primary relationship is themselves, and they have like several partners that they date intermittently as like it fits in their lives, but they want to be like, they want to live alone, they want to like they don't want a relationship escalator with anybody beyond that, right? They just want to be solo poly where they have several partners, but they are like kind of single basically, or like not single, but like they're not in a primary relationship. There's other people who will like have their wife or husband, and then they'll each have like friends with benefits or something else. Like there's so many iterations of what it could look like. And so like I actually think there's like a fair amount of like solo poly people who like are autistic, and they're like, I actually like need a lot of alone time. I need a lot of like quiet. I don't want people in my house all the time. Like I need like, yeah, like 4 nights a week alone. And then I can have like a date night with, you know, what like each partner gets like 1 night or 2 nights a week or something like that. But they like really need their alone time. Like my partner and I, that, yeah, like there's always a hierarchy. That's kind of like my take is like, there's always a hierarchy. You're just kind of not saying it. But I think what's more important is that like and I think this is where like relationship anarchy is like trying to like get to the point of, is like the crux of it is that like everybody has a say in what happens, right? Like there's not like one person whose like opinion just like doesn't matter in the relationship, because sometimes that happens. Sometimes couples will date a person and that person like won't have as much like autonomy in the relationship. I mean, I think there could be codependency in any container.
I was just about to say, you can have codependency in whatever relationship, even in non-sexual relationship. Codependency is just anytime you have two people and it's lopsided and it's just unsustainable. You have codependency whichever way, up, down, left, or right. Somebody said, how you get past the shame? Y'all, we'll do well, actually, this is a good point to do a water break right here. And if you're okay with it, Lexi, we'll do a rapid fire Q&A. If you have any questions for Lexi, go ahead and ask the questions. Some people said something about somebody mentioned something about the Christian thing, and they were a little bit upset. This is a safe space. We don't judge anybody here, so please let's make sure we stay kind and respectful.
And that's the thing, like, is I think like everybody should get to have the relationship they want, right? There are going to be people who like would love to be in a monogamous relationship, and like that's beautiful. Like I have no, like, I know that there's like some people who like are poly and they kind of like feel like being poly is like evolved. Like that's not at all how I feel about it. I think there are people who are definitely monogamous and there's people who are definitely polyamorous, and like both can be beautiful options. My hope for the monogamous people, honestly, is that if they're open-minded enough to listen, that they can just learn how to bring some of these things to their own relationship in a way that feels good to them. So like talking about what you're desiring, talking about what feels good to you, talking about what your limits are sexually, but also just in your entire relationship is so healthy, right? Like how much of monogamy is kind of just like in default mode because it is the norm. And so
Yeah.
like you get to explore whatever that looks like for you. And um yeah, and so like it's not like there's a right and a wrong way. It's just like there's something to be learned, I think,
Yeah.
from the
No,
practices that
no, I'm happy you mentioned that because I do think that for everybody here who's monogamous, there's a lesson that you can take from what you're saying, because a lot of times, especially people who feel restricted within relationships, you feel like you can't be yourself. And if you're a recovering people pleaser, you're not all the way there. You'll do what the other person wants you to do. Before you know it, you've lost yourself within the relationship. So the communication, talking about consent, talking about boundaries, making sure that you feel safe, listening to your body. If we brought all that to monogamous relationships, a lot of people would be better off. So that's a really good perspective. Maybe it's a therapist and me trying to reframe things, but that's a really good perspective to take. You might not like polyamory, but take what you can get out of it, bring it to your monogamous relationship. You'll be able to better respect that person and also speak up for yourself as well. That's
absolutely. And like especially as neurodivergent people, like being able to discuss like what feels good in our body, what doesn't feel good, how when we feel overwhelmed, like what's going on with us, what our boundaries are in our life, like all across the board is so healing like overall. And so for me it's like it doesn't even have to this doesn't even have to be taken in like the context of a relationship, like a
right.
sexual relationship, even like this could just be across the board in your relationship, opening up more avenues for open and honest and vulnerable communication. Because I think that's the real piece that of polyamory that's like everybody says like, oh, people get into polyamory because they think that like they're just gonna like sleep with a bunch of people and then it's just like a lot of people communicating. But like truly it's so helpful to like have these vulnerable, open and honest conversations, because when we get to be witnessed in that, when we get to be like, oh, like, hey, I'm feeling jealous and like I would love for you to like hold me in that and like love me through that and like provide like a safe container for me to navigate that. That's so beautiful. And that doesn't just happen because we date other people, right? Like there might be somebody that like maybe it's your partner's like best friend or like anybody that might make you feel jealous. And in that moment, like wouldn't you rather be able to tell your partner and be like witnessed fully as yourself and like loved through that? Because so often the shame we feel around uh jealousy and like sadness and grief and these emotions that we deem like bad is actually just um like the part of us that's like begging to be witnessed in a thing that doesn't feel great and be like aware that we're still worthy and lovable through that.
Yeah.
And I think that that is can be true in any facet of your relationship.
Yeah, no, I love what you said so much, because I just, and for women too, like I think it's a bit more difficult, because if a guy, let's say I take myself, right, let's say I say, all right, from here on out I'm polyamorous and I'm gonna do things whatever. People will say, oh yeah, Kodo, do what you want to do. But when a woman does it, society is gonna throw all that shame on her, and they'll call you all kinds of words.
Which is
And so
very funny because most of the time people open their relationship because the male partner
right.
is desiring it and they think that they're gonna like hop on dating apps and like 4,000 women are just gonna throw themselves at them. Like, I don't know. And that's like very often
That's not
not
how it
how the
works. Yeah.
cookie crumbles.
Right. Guys don't have a lot of options on dating apps. It doesn't work that way. And then also, like, I believe that the dating apps is kind of meant for you to like spend a lot of time on there. So for a guy, it's probably not the best way to to go about dating. Let me see.
I mean, it
Oh,
definitely can be, right? Like if you are like a really wonderful partner and like you have a few women who like enjoy dating you, absolutely. But there's a lot of people who do think that they're just gonna like walk out in the world and people are gonna fall into their laps, and like that's not it. And I wish I've actually Reddit like went through a period of time where like a bunch of men just kept uploading their field profiles for reviews, and I was just like powering through them. I was like, guys, like you wrote 4 paragraphs and said nothing. Like, I promise you, you could be doing so much better if you like knew how to communicate.
Communication is important. And let me see. Shannon said, I used to be hypersexual, and now, man, I don't have that much interest. I haven't had sex for years. I can still interact with that sex to get emotional support or feeling I need. So in this situation, she can still enjoy like emotional relationships from other people, correct?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, truly, like my first thing in that sort of a situation, I would probably have like my hormone levels tested, because like it might be that it's like all part of the course, but I find that often, and especially as women, this happens where we get our hormones tested, but they just test once, and like our hormones fluctuate so much in a month that it's super important to like know where our levels are at. And then like I would maybe, if that's like something you're interested in, is like pursuing more, like opening yourself back up to like having sex, then I think that that's like for me, that's like would be the number one thing. Like I take supplements that like support me because I have PMDD, which is actually extremely common for women with autism and ADHD. I did not know this.
I've seen a lot of comorbidity between the three of those.
It's why a lot of us get misdiagnosed as bipolar, actually, because we seem like we're having very erratic mood swings, but it's really hormonal.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's like,
there you go.
Yeah. And so like for me, like, and again, if you like tell your like gynecologist that you have PMDD, yeah, it's the worst. If you tell your gynecologist you have PMDD or like whatever, and you come to that conclusion and you ask them what they can do for you, they basically will just tell you that they can put you on an SSRI. And like that's the only option they have, which is not particularly helpful. Although I did just find out from an NP that is working with a friend of mine who went back to school to get her PhD, that it is now officially like an appropriate course of action for medication that women with PMDD can take an SSRI just the week before their cycle. And it actually totally works. The reason people thought you had to take it long term is because they only ever tested SSRIs on men before they just like gave them to people, because people don't test medication on women because our hormones complicate their studies, which is a whole other can of worms.
You're right.
But for women with PMDD, you actually can just take it the week before. So like, yeah, especially if there's like some things going on with hormonally, and if you are like going through menopause or perimenopausal, and I would just, and you're like neurodivergent, I would definitely just look into the hormone level, because there might be some supplements that like would actually feel really good and nourishing for your body to be on.
Yeah, and I want to make an extra point. When it comes to PMDD, I think it's very important if you have a psych provider and an OBGYN, that could be helpful, because the person's
Definitely talk to both of them
throughout the whole month, and of course y'all follow exactly what your doctor tells you. And also even sometimes birth control. I've seen that given for PMDD. I just don't prescribe birth control, so I don't know too much about that outside the SSRIs. But that's a really, really good point. And so to wrap things up, I want you to talk to, if anybody who is neurodivergent, who is relating with your story, right? And whether they're either considering, having a non-traditional relationship, whatever that is, or whether they're already there. If they're at that point where they're about to make that decision, what would you say to them, especially when it comes to shame and how other people may look at them, and if they might not be as comfortable, like putting those boundaries up? What would be your overall message to somebody like that?
To move slowly, more slowly than you think you want to, and to communicate. As uncomfortable as it might feel to have those difficult, vulnerable discussions, it's so much better to have them, to think through them, to really process like what you're wanting, what shame might come up for you, what like emotions might be big for you, what limits do you have, because there will be a lot of people, especially in the like crafting of a unique relationship, who will tell you that there's a right and a wrong way to do it. And like, to me, it's so much more important that you are willing to, like turn inward and listen to yourself. If something doesn't feel good to you, do not do it because your partner wants you to. Do not do it because you think you should, because you think you shouldn't be bothered by it. Like, it doesn't should is so irrelevant in this space. Like, it really needs to be about what does and doesn't feel good and facilitating safety. And you're going to feel so much safer if you've had the conversations, you've made the agreements, you're moving really slowly, and you're taking the time to like let the relationship kind of like go in a way that's like in a really natural cadence versus like just jumping in the deep end. Like, a lot of people don't want to have the conversations. They're super difficult. They're, uncomfortable. And so then they do the thing where they just like dive in the deep end. They're like, okay, we're like open now. Like, we do whatever we want. And then like nobody's talked about anything. People's feelings get hurt. Like, you can't undo harm, right? You can rebuild trust. You can like do a lot, but once the harm is caused, it's so much more difficult to like build that safety. It's a lot easier to like slowly build the safety as you go and like expand in a way that like feels good to you and your nervous system.
Yeah, and thank you for saying that. Yeah, the ugly toxin framed by just to follow up what Lexi said. I've always said this before on live streams. Whether it's a polyamorous, whether it's putting peanut butter on pizza, I don't care what it is. If there's something that you don't want to do and you feel like somebody is forcing you into doing something, you don't have to do that. You do not have to have a poly relationship if your person comes to you and they want you to do that. You do not have to.
And if somebody is like trying to gaslight you into thinking that polyamory is like evolved and like you're being toxic or like you're not letting them like live their freest self, like that is not it, right? Like, you always get to be comfortable. You might just be incompatible for each other. That's fine. But what I really can't stand is when people like try and guilt other people into this lifestyle. Right. Like, that is not it. Like, if you don't want to be poly, don't be poly. Like, please, like, live whatever relationship is truest for you, whatever feels best to you. Don't let somebody like convince you that you should change how you feel because they believe it's like some like higher plane of existence.
Yeah, no, you said it perfectly. And someone says, why are you so self-aware? Now you can tell that she's been on a journey. She's been on a journey, and you've been able to give us so much information, and I'm grateful for it, because it's difficult to find people who can talk about this like authentically and not be like ashamed. And before we got on air, I was asking you, what do we talk about? What don't we talk about? I want to make sure that people feel respected in this space. And there's still a lot of stigma with it. I mean, we saw it earlier in the chat. There's still a lot of stigma with it where people will judge you, even if it's not your parents. Like, somebody might see you in public and they're like, oh, those people are weird because they live a different lifestyle than we live. And it should never be that way. So it takes you being able to stand on the lifestyle that you live and not care about other people's opinions, and for other people to not even be concerned about you. But the way things are, people are always concerned about somebody else's business, and they're like, she shouldn't do that.
A lot of people do feel threatened by polyamory, right? Because like inherently, it does feel like, well, if you're like if people are willing to just like date whoever, then like why would my partner be like faithful to me or whatever? But like in actuality, like if people were more comfortable being poly, then you would also know that people were choosing monogamy intentionally and not just like being forced into it by like compulsory process of like living in society, right? Like, you would actually be two people who don't want to be polyamorous, who want to be monogamous, who want to commit to each other, who can then build agreements around that. And so like, from my perspective, like the freedom to let people be, like, I feel this way, like all of it, right? Like, let people be queer, let people be poly, like let people be who they are. And like, you can just find who's right for you. But when we have people like opting into what they think is like, the default, that's when like there's a lot of people who probably are poly who are dating as monogamous people because they just don't know that they have an option.
Right, and those are the people that I would like for them to see this video, because if, let's say, they're poly and they're in a monogamous relationship, they're gonna ruin a lot of people. They're gonna break a lot of hearts. There's gonna be a lot of trouble because they're trying to fit into something that might not be inherently meant for them.
Yep.
Good point. Great point. And all right, so Genevieve, I agree. How can we drop your information on here, and how can people follow you on social media?
Yeah, the best place is probably
Instagram.
To just follow me on Instagram. Yeah, it's at slutty with 2 Y's for serotonin. And then from there you can like get all of my links. So like my Substack is in there. I write and share podcasts on there. I have like some courses. You can DM me about like one-on-one coaching. I have a Discord. Like there's just like all sorts of things, but the Instagram is probably the best place to find all of them.
All right, so slutty for serotonin, and also I think Ray had mentioned something about the people pleasing. Ray, the people pleasing is living your most authentic life, right? And in Lexi's situation, she's living her most authentic life. Like, she's found a lifestyle that works for her. It works for her partner. And if everybody who's involved in the situation are okay with it, then you don't have to worry about what your parents say or what anybody else says. And it's going to be hard for you to do this if you've grown up neurodivergent and you have to masks to fit in.
Oh,
and
a million percent. Like our whole existence is people
nice
pleasing. Like also like, again, be patient. Like that's the thing about somatic work too, is like it's slow for a reason. You're shifting your whole nervous system, right? So like if you've been a people pleaser your whole life, it's going to take a long time to unlearn that. That's okay. We start small and we start noticing the ways we people please, and then we start shifting the behavior, and then we just go deeper and deeper, and then, you know, eventually we find the like really deep stuff. But like it's okay to start small and titrate yourself to that. Like you're not going to wake up tomorrow and just not be a people pleaser.
It'll take a while, because think about it, you live your whole life in a certain way, and now being somebody who has decided to make the binary decision of I'm going to stop people pleasing is going to affect your relationships. It's going to affect everything. It's going to affect how you feel about yourself. Your confidence might drop a little bit, but as people leave your life because they didn't respect your boundaries, you'll feel so much better. And then at that point, you'll actually know what is your decision. Like, did I want to do this, or did I feel like I had to do this? And I want everybody who's watching here, everybody around the world, I want people to do what they want to do without feeling like it was forced upon them. That's why autonomy is so important. So Leilani, I completely agree. If somebody violates your boundaries, you tell them to kick rocks. You know, sometimes we have to have addition by subtraction. People have to leave our lives, you know, unfortunately or fortunately.
I saw in the autism subreddit, somebody posted like, everybody likes to bully neurodivergent people until a PDA profile comes along, and then all of a sudden their feelings are hurt. And it's like, because sometimes you do need, you can set the boundary kindly, and then like there's only so many times, right? That's the point of a boundary. There are consequences to your actions. And if you're unwilling to like acquiesce to what I'm sharing with you is my boundary, then the consequences get enacted.
Yeah. And last point I want to make, when it comes to boundaries, we don't, this is not a negotiation. This is not a negotiate. You don't negotiate with somebody, like, right. Like if you want to stand to your parents or somebody who's treating you wrong, and you're telling them something, you don't come and say, oh, I feel so bad. But like, no, it's not a negotiation. You're telling them, hey, last week Thursday, you said this about me. It hurt my feelings. It didn't make me feel good. So this thing cannot happen again. I would appreciate that. Thank you.
And you can still be like kind and compassionate. Like it doesn't have to be super harsh, right? You can still say like, hey, I don't know if you remember this, but I told you last week that this is the boundary. If it happens, this is going to be the consequence of that. I'm going to remove myself from the situation, whatever.
Right.
And that's okay. Like we can still hold compassion for people as they're navigating change to accommodate us. and we still get to protect ourselves and hold those boundaries.
Right. Because living a life for somebody else to make them feel good at your expense is not a life that's it's not a life that's worth living. Like, you'll never get to your full potential. And I want everybody watching to feel like you can reach your full potential. So
Preach.
this has been a great discussion. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know you're in Denver. I know it's an hour past there, but I'm so thankful for you. We're definitely going to stay in touch.
Thank you so much for having me.
And everybody who watched, I appreciate y'all. Hope y'all have a fantastic night. Till next live stream, peace. Take care.